So we're moving into the start of the 80s, and just about 1977, 78, there was a girl called Vanessa Walker who was a model. And if you watch Absolute Beginners, she's the girl that is the zebra. And when he goes, Absolute Beginners, he's in a trench coat and he's at the side of the River Thames and he's walking through and he's being stalked by this zebra. And it's just basically she's in a zebra outfit, but a dress, and she's got her hair all wild. And she saw me dancing in a club and she said, you should model. And I started laughing. I thought, what, me? Nah, you know, I was flattered. And we started dancing together. And then I saw her in town. I was on Mosley Street and she came running up to me and she grabbed me and took me up to Model Team International to meet Peter Martin, who was the agent. Anyway, they suggested that I went back with some pictures. So I had some what I thought were professional pictures. And went up to the agency. And there were 3 boys sat in the room. There was one that was like a new romantic covered in makeup. He got some abuse off Peter Martin. The lad that was next to me was a classic model look. So he was already signed. It was like, yeah, we're very interested in you. Just go through there, sign these forms. And then he got to me. And I had about 8 pictures. And it was like what I thought was a model. And I'd got a makeup artist to do them. But they didn't know how to do black makeup. So I had this like quite pale skin. But everything else was dark. And then another day I'd had another picture done and I was in like a green trench coat. I was in the where the old West Bank was, and it was like a night time and it was lit and it was like an orange light on it and it was a perfect setting for a fashion shoot. But I'd seen it and I thought, I'm going to do a picture there. And I did it. And as he went through it, and this is how he went, that shit. And I thought, I've had enough of this. And I was just about to stand up. I wanted to punch him, to be honest with you. It's a good job I didn't, because he was an ex-policeman. And he was also a very bad person. And he's in the news that's his story, not mine. And I was just about to kick off with him, and he just went like that. He said, that's the money. And what he was saying was, those are irrelevant. I can now see a market for you in that. So I was signed to the agency. And when you started work, you had to go on go-sees. So I started going down to London, getting the train at your own expense. And I would go and see photographers. I'd be given a list of photographers. You'd have your briefcase with all your pictures in, which was called, and you'd go on what we call go-sees. And you would traipse all over London seeing photographers, which I did. And you'd walk in, and like the reception would turn around, and I always remember this girl going, "Sorry, darling," she says, "we don't use blacks."
God, shocking.
Yeah, you would, yeah. But I just went, I said, "Oh, okay, who does?"
Yeah.
And it's like they didn't realise the connotations of what she'd said. It was just business, and she went, "We don't use blacks, darling." And so she wrote down a list of photographers that did use black models, and that's the ones that I went to see. And for quite a while, it was really, really hard to get work. But then things changed. And I knew things had changed when I was booked by Photolink Studio, which was a big fashion. They did all the big mail order. And I was sent in to do, I think it was Grattan catalogues. And there was literally a bank of chairs with different men sat on them. I was 5'10.5". On my card it said 5'11", but I was 5'10". I'm 5'9" now, so I've definitely shrunk. And I just remember sitting there, and these were faces that I'd seen in magazines. I was really into fashion, so I'd seen them in magazines, and I'm sat right in the middle of them, this little black man. And I just looked and I thought, I've arrived.
Yeah.
I knew then that it was the start of something. And at the beginning of hip hop, there's a range of caps called Kangol, which we all know now.
Yeah.
And I was booked for Kangol. Didn't realise what it was. And it was all the guys in Chicago and New York were wearing these really big hats, the big furry Kangol hats. And then I was sat down and they started putting all these hats on me. And I'm like, they were horrible. Sorry, I shouldn't say that. But to me, they were horrible. I thought I looked like a clown in them. So they were photographed. That then turned into a campaign. And I remember a friend phoning me up saying, "You're not going to believe it. We've seen you on the Underground in New York."
Wow.
Like a full page.
Yeah.
It was in Vogue, but it was a quarter. It was a quarter page. So they'd obviously. Oh no, it wasn't. How it happened. It was there was a magazine called Ebony, and they had taken a full page out. So it was in that, and somehow it got into Vogue, but it was a quarter page at the back. So I can say that was in Vogue.
Key picture.
I'll tell you what. I'll tell you about what happened to my portfolio, and that's what makes it really, really difficult and upsets me a lot. But it's just one of those things. Let me just go back to what happened then. Then I was booked for a job, and when I was booked for that job, there was a man that was sat next to me, or in the next section. And he was one of the world's top models. There was a guy called Graham Rogers. And if you watch the old Turkish Delight adverts, if you go on YouTube, and it's where he's like a sheik.
Yeah.
And he had a model called, I'm not sure if it was Vivian Lynn or Mary Helvin. These were two top models at the time. I think it was Vivian Lynn for some reason. And then it's, oh, fries, Turkish Delight. And the scimitar comes down and it wafts over the sand and then her face disappears.
Yeah.
And it was Graham Rogers. And I just remember sitting, and he was massive, and I was sat next to him, and we just chatted away. And then also I went, oh my God, this is Graham Rogers. And he was so down to earth. And that's when I realised I was doing okay.
Yeah.
After that, in the early 80s, I decided to leave Manchester and just travel out, went abroad. I did all right. It wasn't amazing. And then I ended up moving to Barcelona, and that was a mistake. There was a group called Agency Group, and they'd phoned the agency with I was called Bill Bailey then. We'd like Bill Bailey to come out, and I kept thinking, oh, I'm going to be massive. I'm in Europe. I'm going to be in Barcelona. I'm going to be in Madrid. Nothing. It was just all I got was young photographers wanted to photograph me for their portfolios. And I did get the odd job, but I wasn't making enough money, and my savings were going fast. So I knew that I had to come back. I didn't come back to Manchester, I went to Edinburgh. And that was the complete change for me. That's when really everything solidified, all the things that I had learned and experienced. And I lived with two beautiful friends who had invited me up, Paul and Graham. And we lived above the Beehive restaurant with a castle in the background behind us. In the Grass Market, which is an incredible area. And then I got a job at Cinderella Rockefellers as a DJ, trainee DJ, and I was working under John Leslie, Ross King, who does Entertainment Today from Glasgow, and a guy called Andy Ross, who became quite big in radio up in Scotland. And I worked under them until eventually I sort of got on. I couldn't mix. Mixing was just coming in, and I couldn't mix. So everything was talking between the breaks. You just had to talk. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Cinderella Rockefellers,
Yeah. You wouldn't have been expected to mix them, really, would you?
No. You had to talk.
Yeah.
And it was a performance. And when I first did it, I think the first time I ever did it, it was like... And it was just a case of, I felt so stupid, I just put the record on. And fortunately, I think it was Andy was like in the booth with me, and he just put his hands on my shoulders, and he squeezed me and he said, relax. He said, just construct something in your mind that you can talk. All you're talking about are drinks. Any forward events. That's all you're interested in. This new record that you're pushing, just keep it simple. He said, and charm the girls. He said, if you charm the girls, they'll be your biggest fans. So that's what I did. And by that time, my two friends, about a year later, decided they'd been offered jobs in America, in Michigan. So they moved there. And I was basically, I was in a flat that I was renting from a lad that I worked with and his girlfriend, who were getting married but didn't want to move into the flat. So I moved into that, and it was a bit outside Edinburgh. And then I met a girl at Cinderella Rockefellers. She looked like Grace Jones. She was 6 foot tall, and she was stunning. She was crazy. And so I moved her into the flat with me, and I slept, there was like an alcove, and I slept in the alcove above, and then she slept in the bedroom. And a little funny story. One night, it was a Friday night. I didn't go out on a Friday night, and I was in bed, and around about 2 o'clock in the morning, there was this big noise. She comes flying in, and she says, "Guess what, Bill? Guess what I brought home?" And I went, "What?" I thinking she'd brought like a chip supper or something, and it was the lead out of the Bay City Rollers.
Yeah.
Les McEwen. Anyway, my bed was where the dining room area was, where the kitchen was a square, the dining room was there, there was a step ladders that went in, and it overlooked the lounge, but it's a massive space. So, and I loved it. I was up high, I could put the telly on and watch it. And next minute, this is around about 4 o'clock in the morning, I heard footsteps coming up the ladders, and it was bloody Les McEwen. I won't go any further, but it was like,
They
get
were
out.
really big, weren't they, then, as well?
Yeah. Well, no, the careers had finished by then.
Oh, was it?
Yeah, they were very much a 70s.
Yeah.
But he was a lovely lad. You know, sadly he's passed, but he was so down to earth.
Yeah.
Anyway, that was that. So that was an incredible experience. And then we both decided to buy flats. So in the Grass Market, there's a place called Webster's Land, which goes up to Toll Cross. And there was a barrack complex there. And we went in, and I didn't think we'd get a mortgage. But for some reason, she got hers first. And then I went in, she brought me in, she said, "Bill wants a flat." And they were about 24 grand for a 1-bedroom. So I had all the paperwork and everything. Didn't think I'd get it, but I got it. Because it was in the days when they were desperate to sell quick. And so having that as your address, King Stables Road, was, you know, I was like, yeah. And then the pull to America came. So Paul and Graham had said, "Come to America, great future, you know, do this, do that." And at the time, I was in a band in Edinburgh called Cohesion, Cohejon, and we were doing quite well. But we'd done the Battle of the Bands, and we were voted most promising for NME, and Wet 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 won that night, but not Marty Pello. It was the other guy with the red hair. I think he was either a drummer or keyboard player. He was the lead singer, and he had a bloody good voice. And I'd met at that time. I started choreographing hair shows for like the big shows. So I was doing the alternative hair show. So I was travelling to London. The difference was, if I'd have been in Manchester, people would have expected me to do it for nothing. Because that's what Manchester was like. Oh, it's the prestige of doing it. And that's not to knock Manchester, but that's what it was like at the time. Well, as soon as I moved to Edinburgh, they would say, "We've got to go and see a client in London." They'd fly me down and put me in a hotel.
Yeah.
And that's because, and believe it or not, it's because in the way they said it was because you were from another country. I said, just over a border. But there was a massive difference in the way that I was treated in respect of my creativity. And I did shows. I did the Albert Hall, and that was for L'Oreal. But the hair team were called Irving Rust, and they were the world's leading hair team at the time. I'd gone in as a hair model, as you can see, but I had hair then, and we'd done one show, which was just a very small thing in a Glasgow hotel, and then they said, "We're doing a show at the Albert Hall in London. Would you be willing to do it? I said, yes. They said, well, that's the fee. It wasn't much, but it was enough. And I went down to do that. And the choreographer at the time, he was struggling with this show. He'd gone into the Albert Hall. And as you know, you've got the upper circles, then you come down, then you have what I call the ring, like the big ring circle, but they had seating in it. And we were all set waiting for him to sort of work the routine out. And the next minute we heard he's gone. He just said, I can't do it. He said, this is too big for me. And I just remembered looking at it, and I was in panic mode myself. The models were in panic mode. The stylists were in panic mode. And I said, look, okay. I said, I know where he's made his mistake. If you look at it, when I was looking at he'd done a routine, he'd done it on paper, and I had it, and I turned around and said, his routine takes us to the end of the stage. The stage is a 3-ring circus because everyone's going to be sitting round.
Yeah.
And I said, it's a circus ring. Let's base a show on a 3-ring circus. And what's my name?
Billy Smart.
Billy Smart.
Billy Smart Circus.
So, and I swear on my life, I just went 3-ring circus. So the Russ had major contacts. They had incredible PR. They got in touch with a couture designer who offered all his dresses, and these were ball gowns. So that meant all the hair had to be really, really big. And I based the show on, I taught the girls how to be animals. So, you know, I'm talking like a lion, you know, not an elephant, nothing like that. But they took on the mantle of that animal. And because they were so professional and so good at what they could do, they just walked. Everything was about walking and then climbing onto like the lion, like the step boxes to climb on top. And gradually, say there was 14 models, there were 14 boxes, and the whole routine was sort of like walking around, walking through, walk onto the box, stand there and then get into a certain position. And the audience went ballistic at the end of it. It basically was the end of a massive day of people coming in showing their new designs and hair cutting and things like that. But that was the finale. So that was my start into choreographing fashion shows. And then we did the Hippodrome. We did like really incredible venues, and then it was a case of going abroad with them to Paris and the south of France, going to Switzerland, going to Italy. And it was literally a roadshow where they would go and show their designs, but it was for major clients. So it was either L'Oreal or Weller at the time. So I started doing that during that period. And then when I was in the south of France at a place called Béziers, there was a woman there who managed to sneak in. It was a closed theatre space. And I just remember doing the routine and everything. It was based on Joan of Arc. And it was the Maid of Orleans, or Orleans. So all the outfits were workers for freedom, but what they'd done is they'd put Crusades cross on it. So when the girls flowed, they looked like an army, and all the hair just looked like helmets.
Yeah.
With bits of spikes off. So it was absolutely fantastic. The makeup artists were amazing. And she was sat in the audience. Well, there was no audience. She was just sat down. So eventually I walked over to her. I said, excuse me. I said, but who are you? And she said, my name's Faye Thompson. I'm from Sheer Impact in Michigan. And I said, you're not supposed to be here. And I laughed and I went, it's a bit late now, isn't it? I said, don't you dare go out and tell anybody what we're doing, because it was close there. And again, I just believe I've been blessed, because it's like where you meet somebody at the right time.
Yeah.
And she said, if you're ever in Michigan, come and see me. And she gave me a card, Faye Thompson, Sheer Impact, Ann Arbor, Michigan. So, move ahead. My two best friends said, come to Michigan. And where do they live? Ann Arbor.
Ah, yeah.
So everyone said, when did you shave all your hair off? So I'm just going to say that because it's actually a funny story and try and be as quick as possible. I arrived, went to see Faye, and she said, do you know anybody here? And I said, well, I've got my two roommates or housemates. I said, but no. She says, I'm going to introduce you to Ann Arbor. I'm going to organise. So you organised the party. It was in the summer, height of summer, boiling hot. I'm going to have a barbecue. And it's for you. So Paul and Graham came with me. And at the time, I used to have a really bad habit from quite a young age where I used to just pick my hair out. I just sit and pick. I had a couple of really, really bad experiences, like sitting there at a dinner table in Langan's and just picking my hair, and it was just on the table. How embarrassing is that? So I ended up with couple of bald patches. So I used to put this black Leishner stage wax on it and then gel over it so that nobody could see the bald patches. This day, I've done exactly that. Hair looks great. You can't see the bald patches, but boiling hot sun. Faye's not there. And I said, where's Faye? And so she's just getting ready. She comes down the stairs, puts her arms around me, does that on the top of my head, comes up, and there's this big thing of black wax. I was so embarrassed by that. The following day, I went into the salon and she shaved all my hair off. And that's how I ended up with bald head.
And you stayed since? And since that day?
And from that day, yeah. For about the first 3 weeks, I just wore woolly hats.
Yeah.
And I was at the university then, so I was embarrassed. And then one day, I think it was at night, I took it off and we got out for dinner, and I'd forgotten that I'd taken the hat off. And the following day, my friend Paul turned around and said, what are you putting that on your head for? He said, just leave it off. Nobody batted an eyelid. In fact, everyone kept saying, looks really, really cool, you look really, really good. So that was that. I'm missing quite a lot of stuff, but that's what you do. I'm trying to flow through to the present day.
So in the timeline, where are we at now? Are we at the 80s?
We're in the 80s.
Yeah.
Very much so. So this would be about 1983. About 1983, 84, 85. You know, I told you about the club scene. We've had that conversation before, like going to Studio 54. Studio 54 on that night, it was absolutely peeing it down. I was with a couple of friends who were hairdressers, and the main one. We walked in, and it was like it was empty. Midweek,
it was empty, wasn't it?
Yeah.
It was open every day of the week. Because I did a video in my parish, and he was telling me about it. And there was a nickname for the people who went from certain parts of New York, but in the week it was empty.
Yeah. But the reason why we went is because I kept going on about it.
Yeah, it was
and there were other clubs further uptown or downtown, you know. So I think Zenon was then. You got Paradise Garage as well, and I know everyone raves about it, but to me it was just like walking into a place, and it wasn't smart. You know, Studio 54 it was all blaring lights and everything, but because it was empty, there was no soul in it. The music was still on, you know, but there were no stars. That's all I can remember. It was like, come on, let's get out of here. And Paradise Garage, Larry Levan was on, but he was a DJ.
Yeah.
So I was just into the music. I wasn't into labels and names. If I like a record, I like it. I just wanted to dance all night. Hot and sweaty, you know, do me poppers. You know, it was crazy. So that's how I saw it. It's only when you move years later and you say, oh, I went to Studio 54, and they go, huh? But remember, they were just clubs. It was the people that made them, you know. And Larry Levan's music was amazing that night. He, what was this? He did Gladys Knight, Taste a Bitter Love. And he played it, but not the Joey Negro version. He played the original version. And to hear sounds like that, like Motown tunes, and it wasn't just disco, but there was other stuff that you'd never heard, but he just had this continuance of being able to play music and keep the beats in the same place. It was never frenetic, you know, where you were going mad. It was just very soulful and very emotional, the music, because you just sit there and you sniff your poppers, and then I suppose it's like when you take your first D. Bad boy I was. And it just lifts you into another place emotionally. And then you leave those places at like 2, 3 in the morning, just covered in sweat, and then you go and have breakfast somewhere. And I put 5 stone on when I was in America, so I came back quite chunky.
Was he drinking a lot, or was it all the
Yeah, I wasn't happy
American fast food?
Yeah, I wasn't happy there.
Yeah.
And yes, it was American fast food. I mean, while I was there, because I wasn't supposed to be working, I worked in a place called Preston's, which was a ribbon chicken restaurant, but it was one of the best ones. Tips were amazing. I worked at the Cruise Club, which was it was a gay bar, and it's quite seedy, but sort of like work behind the bar. Again, the tips were amazing. You made really, really good money. And I worked one of the best nights in Cruise Bar was when they did the Miss Gay USA pageant. And I was desperate to work behind the bar because I knew the tips were going to be anyway. And it was called Crazy Craig that owned it. And he went, "No, you ain't working behind the bar. I want you to look after the judges." So I suppose if you look at RuPaul's Drag Race, that's exactly what it was.
Yeah.
I had to serve them in the change room, and you'd just see these men, with all their with this thing on their head, pulled back, and they'd be applying their makeup. And if you saw the original person, as they walked in, and what they transformed into, I just remember freaking out. And they all had to do a performance. And our club drag queen was called Bombshell Billy, and she looked like Bonnie Tyler.
Yeah.
And she was like, and she had that southern drawl as well. So it was just crazy. And I just remember serving the drinks and thinking, I'm not going to make any money this weekend. And it was like, I was a bit fed up about it. And then the day of the competition, it was all day, ran into the evening, and then on the Sunday, early hours of the morning, they were all getting ready to pack up to go back to the hotels. And one of the drag queens walked over and said, "This is for you." And it was an envelope. And when I opened it up, there was like $2,000 in tips.
Was that?
Yeah. Just in notes, like hundreds. And the lads that worked behind the bar, they made about 500 that night. But the reason I got it was, I was good at what I did.
Yeah.
Entertain them. They were making a lot of money anyway, because they were making massive tips from performing. And then the woman that won it, which I think she was from Texas, she made $25,000 that night. It was quite a big prize. And she must have put about $1,000 in for that, because she really liked me. So that was it. But I made the decision to come home. There was a club called Taboo, which was in downtown Detroit, and there was another club called the Nectarine Ballroom. The Nectarine Ballroom was probably one of the best clubs I've ever been into. It had the most diverse group of people and races, and it was gay, it was straight, it was when I say diverse, and they played the 80s music and a lot of Madonna, a lot of Culture Club, but those 80s artists. And then I just fell in love with this place, and I met the owner of it. And then one night they said, "Come on, we're going to take you to a club called Taboo." And we walked in. And when I walked in, remember being black, there were certain places they would ask for 5 forms of ID.
Did they?
Yeah. 5 forms.
Five?
Who carries, they'd
Yeah,
say, we need 5 forms of ID.
Yeah.
In a way, what it was saying was, you're not coming in.
Yeah.
That's the only way I could view it. And I would never take my passport out with me. I did have like my university ID. That was it. And I would show that. So we knew the bars not to go to, but we also knew the bars to go to. And they would send me up front, and I'd always be with somebody, and I'd be talking, not realising they were saying, "Wait till the doorman hears your voice." So we got up to the doors of Taboo. They'd made a decision not to let some of us in. And then this man came over who was the manager. And it was, didn't know who it was. He came over, asked where we were from. We said, "We're from Manchester in the UK. We're living here in Ann Arbor." And he was like that, took us in, straight through the door. Saw him a bit later, just say thank you to him. And that was Madonna's brother.
Was it?
Yeah. I can't remember if it was Michael or Chris.
Yeah.
Is it Ciccone?
Yeah.
Yeah. It was one or the other.
Yeah.
But I'll never forget that, that night. And again, Taboo was exactly what it was, Taboo.
Yeah.
It was an amazing club. I made the decision to come back